Trying to understand the eminence of real-world assets and the DeFi world? Then you are welcome to Link to the Chain, a podcast brought to you by Vsauce. It is designed to help you understand the happenings of decentralized finance along with real-world assets. I am your host, Nikki from Vsauce. I will be inviting experts from the Web3 industry to share with you their experiences and ideologies on RWAs and the DeFi world. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by Zach Marks. He's the co-founder and CEO of Jia. Zach, first off, I just want to say congratulations about your fundraising and thank you for co-hosting the side event with Vsauce at Token 2049. Could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe provide some background on how and why Jia got started?
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's great to be part of the extended Vsauce family. We had a great time in Singapore at that Token 2049 event, and I think, well, I'm sure anyone who's listening to your podcast must already be interested in this world of real world assets, but it definitely felt like the hottest topic at Token 2049. I don't know if you felt the same way, Andrew, but there was a lot of energy around it. So, there's a quick background of that's all my story, and that sort of leads to Jia. But my career has pretty much been focused on the challenge of expanding financial access in emerging markets. I'm not from an emerging market. I'm originally from Philadelphia in the U.S., but I've always really loved traveling and learning new languages, and mostly just hanging out with street food vendors as I'm on my travels. And so shortly after college, my first job was as an English teacher. I was teaching English in India, and I became really close friends with the guy selling samosas and chai outside the school, just the local chaiwala. And here was a guy who was running a really good business. He was employing people. He was providing a product that made us all happy and brought together a little community around his stand. And yet, when he wanted to grow his business, he could not access any financing. And I found this out firsthand because he was talking to me about it. And as someone from Philadelphia, I didn't really know all that much about the challenges of a small business owner in New Delhi accessing finance. So when I stopped teaching and began my first job as a management consultant, I got myself assigned to projects working in the world of financial inclusion, just so I could learn a lot more about microfinance. And so my first experience with this world, I'd call it microfinance 1.0, was working with community microfinance organizations. And I guess just to give a bit more context of this challenge we're solving, if you went to a bank in India, say, and said, "Hey, Mr. Banker, why don't you give loans to good businesses like this local chai stand?" They'd say there's a couple challenges, but probably the biggest one is there's no real good data to use to underwrite that business. They don't have a credit score. They might not even have many digital transactions to underwrite. And the second challenge they'd say is, well, this loan is probably too small for us to really care about. Maybe this guy needs $500 of financing, but it will cost us more than that just to go and meet this guy and underwrite him and disperse loans to him. So with that's sort of like the problem statement. And when I began my career working in community microfinance, the way that traditional microfinance institutions try to overcome this challenge is they put people in groups, and people who aren't served well by banks are typically already saving and borrowing in local community savings groups. They have different names in different countries. In the Philippines, for example, they're called paluwagan. You might have heard of them, Nikki. In Africa, in East Africa and Kenya, they're called chamas. In West Africa, they're called susus. They have different names everywhere, but the idea is people are sort of saving and borrowing together. And what traditional microfinance institutions do is they will typically use these sorts of community groups to lend with some joint liability. So maybe if you and I are in a group and I default, you're on the hook for me. And so this is sort of a great first step in the direction of financial inclusion. We've seen a lot of these microfinance institutions scale, and Muhammad Yunus won a Nobel Prize for coming up with this idea with the Grameen Bank. but they don't really scale. I think you sort of without technology, the costs are very, very high to service and grow these groups. And so, in search of something that would scale a little bit better, I joined what I think is the wave of microfinance 2.0, sort of fintech lending and the approaches of using technology to reach people and solve this challenge. And so I joined one of the first companies to do mobile lending. So the idea was there's all these people around the world with cell phones, and maybe they don't have credit scores or bank accounts, but they have phones, and your phone has great data about you. So I was an early employee at a company that was basically doing that. It was using phone data to try to underwrite and distribute really small loans. And that company really grew. That sort of solved the scale problem that I mentioned from Microfinance 1.0, but it kind of lost, I think, a bit of the community element from traditional microfinance. And as a result, I think a lot of borrowers, they were able to keep borrowing and repaying, but they weren't necessarily able to grow their wealth because typically the way you grow your wealth is through some ownership stake of some enterprise, of something. And that's what got me really excited about, I think, the world of Web3. There's all this exciting narratives around distributed ownership and decentralization. And so it got me thinking, what if there's a way to combine the scale of fintech lending, microfinance 2.0, with the community-based ownership principles of microfinance 1.0? And that's how we started Jia. So what we do at Jia is we provide blockchain-based financing to small businesses in emerging markets. And when the borrowers repay, they earn an ownership stake in the form of a Jia token. And it almost is like an on-chain global cooperative. So that's the initial premise of Jia. And I've been talking a lot, so I'll kind of pause, and we can we can go somewhere next from here.
No, that was really great. That's like a boom opening, and I love it because you can tell that you have a lot of passion in this, in Gia, essentially. And I do love everything that you mentioned, including culture, community, accessibility, financial inclusion. It's such a huge nuisance, I guess you could say, especially with this
Mm,
emerging industry of Web3 and how it's
yeah.
still surrounded by a lot of FUD. And for those who don't know what FUD is, that's fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So yeah, it's great that you are really caring about the problem and helping small businesses and, like you said, microfinance and just getting them the accessibility that they need. So I do give you guys at Gia kudos for sure. And another, I guess, side question to that is, was there a certain reason why y'all chose to do real world assets?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the real world asset is like a buzzword, I think, at the moment. But for me, from the very beginning of my interest in anything using blockchain, it has really only been insofar as there is a real world application. I mean, I think a lot of the origins of crypto are in sort of like the online crypto economy. I'll just call it that. Things that don't necessarily touch the real world. But as I just sort of explained, for me, what's always gotten me excited is how do we help a chaiwala like Ramesh grow his business, or how do we help someone selling balut on the roadside in the Philippines grow their business? And I mean, those businesses are very real world assets that I just described, whether it's samosas or barbecue skewers or whatever. And so I think the reason why it's exciting though to to begin bridging that gap, I think, between what's happening on chain and the real world, is I really do believe the future of finance is going to be increasingly moving on chain, and that's just because of all of the great um, characteristics of on chain finance that we don't have in the traditional financial world. Everything from just transparency. Um, I mean, even just talking about that for a moment, if you think about the reason why there is such a lack of funding uh, in emerging markets, often it's because funders and capital allocators don't have visibility into where their money will go if they deploy it in an emerging market. And so just by the ability to provide transparency into where those transactions are happening with an on-chain record, you already are beginning to sort of tackle that challenge. If we talk about why a street vendor in the Philippines can't get a loan from a Filipino bank, um, maybe the Filipino bank will say, well, there's no credit score for this guy. But if we begin dispersing loans and tracking that street vendor's repayments on chain, we're actually creating a credit history for this guy. And so we're actually using the blockchain as a global credit bureau. So that's just like an example of why I think blockchain can help with this challenge of financial access.
Yeah, I love that because it really does hit home. My family's from the Philippines, and whenever I think anyone from America who is born here and they go to visit a
Yeah.
third world country or anywhere that's obviously not the US, or even certain parts in the US where it's not a big city, it really humbles you, I think, when you go to these places and you can see so much potential, especially in your example with with the street vendor. They may make bomb, pardon my French, bomb ass food, and no one knows
Hmm.
about it because they don't have the funding to do branding and marketing or expand their business and open, two or three more carts and then open up a possible brick and mortar location. But it's like, I'm glad that there are people like you and companies like Jia who are up and coming to help those folks who maybe would never have a sliver of hope because they don't have financial
Totally.
literacy education, or they don't have access to a bank and they don't even know about a credit score. So it is important to kind of be a voice for the underdog, so to speak. I'm always all about, fighting for those who may not have a voice or who maybe feel like they're not smart enough or they don't have the connections, or a lot of smart people and a lot of potential people they may be introverts. So
Yeah.
it's kind of up to the rest of the community to be able to, like you said, be that bridge to connect that gap. So I love that about
Yeah.
you
I mean,
guys.
it's like I mean, I like what you just said about just, I mean, it's really humbling to work with these sort of entrepreneurs who are really working super hard to support their families. I mean, most of us probably listening to this podcast have some sort of job where we're working on our laptop like most of the time and just living like a whatever it is, a tech worker's existence. Um, but you know, last week, or I guess it was a couple weeks ago at this point, I was just hanging out with one of our borrowers in the Philippines who runs a bakery. And it's not to say that bakers in the Philippines necessarily work harder than bakers in the United States, but just here's a guy who runs a super small business. He's basically up at 3 a.m. every day, and then he's on his feet from 3 a.m. until 9 p.m. just working to make his business work, just to provide food for his family, and he's providing an incredibly important service for his community because people all need his pan de sal to be happy and get through a day. And I think it's just very humbling to work alongside someone who is putting in that many hours to something they're really passionate about, and to be a small part of that story is really satisfying.
For sure. Yeah, don't be mentioning pandesals now. We're gonna get hungry up in here. Um, but yeah, again, for those who don't know what a pandesal is, it's a little. It's kind of like sweet, a little sweet, maybe a little salty. I guess that's where the word "sal" comes
Mm,
from pan de
sweet salty
sal.
breakfast bun. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my god, and you throw a little spam in the middle. Ooh, anyway.
Mm.
Um
Hmm.
it's all this food talk, but moving on though, here Zach, as you know, Huma Finance was also out there and they were one of our
Yeah.
episodes as well. And you two have collaborated. Could you tell us maybe a story about how that collaboration happened and yeah, just how that
Yeah.
blossomed?
Yeah, I think the partnership with Huma has been great. I think for both of us, we both um, were relatively new companies when we got a chance to meet each other, thanks to um, our head of credit had worked with their founders before at Earnin, and it's always helps to just have that personal relationship and trust to kick off a relationship. But what they were building was this really exciting DeFi lending protocol, bringing real world assets on chain and providing liquidity for those sorts of asset originators. Um, I think in our initial roadmap, we imagined we would have to build something like Huma ourselves. And it was so great when we actually met them because we realized, oh, we can partner with these folks and just focus on what we really do best, which is originating these real world assets, running emerging markets microfinance portfolios. And so what we kicked off with them back in May was a liquidity pool where investors from around the world can deploy their US dollar stablecoins. And we in turn use those US dollars to provide financing to small businesses. So we, um, when someone like that Pondasal bakery owner, his name is Armand, by the way. So shout out to Armand. When Armand wants to take a Jia loan, that money is just off ramped from the liquidity pool, off ramped into Philippine pesos, which is for now how Armand needs it because he doesn't quite have a way to put U.S. dollar stablecoins to work. But what he doesn't know is necessarily in the back end, that's actually creating a digital on-chain footprint. And when he repays his loan, it gets re-on ramped, and those LPs from that liquidity pool are able to access those returns. So to date, I think I think that liquidity pool we've raised about, I guess, almost $400,000 from it, and we've put that to work to originate, I think, $1 million in microloans. Since the capital revolves, most of our loans are between 1 to 3 months, and so they typically, the portfolio revolves more times than the 1 year payback period to LPs. But it's been really exciting just to have that off the ground with Huma, and we're excited for more to come. For example, we do a lot of invoice financing where we take a real world asset, like an invoice that, say, that baker Armand might have out to a grocery store where he sells his bread to. And in the US, most bakeries who are doing that kind of business, if they bake bread and they sell it to a big supermarket, like Ralph's or Vaughn's or wherever your local supermarket is when you're listening to this, those bakers would probably take that invoice to their local bank or to a small business lender, and they could factor it. They could basically access the capital from that invoice upfront for a small fee. But in the Philippines, that market just isn't built out, and it certainly isn't built out for someone like Armand, for like a small micro bakery. But what we can do is take that invoice and tokenize it and put it on chain and use that as a security interest, basically to unlock liquidity for his small business. So we haven't launched that on Huma yet, but we're really excited to do that next.
Wow, that's amazing. I love all the real use case scenarios, especially with with Armand out in the Philippines. Yep, shout out to you. Yeah, keep
Yeah,
baking the pandesal. Hopefully, I'll be able to visit back to the motherland and try it someday. But
totally.
no, those are, I think those are the best kind of explanations, though, especially for folks who may still be kind of lost or confused about how DeFi lending works and real world assets and all these, like you said, kind of buzzwords. When you put it into a real use case scenario like that, I think it really puts all the puzzle pieces together for folks to kind of see the big picture of why this industry is essentially, I don't know, I don't want to say like it's like, I'm like at a loss for words, but it's really the next iteration of the internet. Not only that, with the transparency and the blockchain part, but it can really help so many people around the world. And I think that access is probably the biggest thing. It's like access and transparency. Those are the biggest things, I think, what blockchain and all this good stuff kind of attributes to. So I love that story. And we have also seen that there are more and more investors looking into the emerging markets. Like we had a guest, her name's Barbara. She's also the CEO and managing partner of Unicorn Growth Capital. Shout out Barbara, I love that
Mm.
episode. And
Yeah.
they
Hey,
also
Barbara.
focus.
I feel like I feel like I'm an extended friend of Barbara's as well.
Nice. Yeah, she's wonderful. And they also focus on emerging markets. So could you please tell us more about your thoughts, share some more stories? I think you're a great storyteller, by the way, Zach. And our audiences always like to listen to that. So yeah, please feel free to dive in
Thanks.
on any experiences that you might have had with Barbara.
Cool. Well, oh, I shouldn't. I don't have that extensive experience with Barbara, so I don't know if I have a good experience. Oh, you know what? I have a story about her colleague, though, which is that I think in Kenya in particular, well, in most emerging markets, I think like the VC scene is small enough. And so I had the pleasure of being a guest along with Barbara's co-partner based in Nairobi. This big Japanese VC took us out to the best sushi restaurant in Nairobi together, so we had a chance to enjoy that meal. But that's not. I don't. That's not. I don't know, that's not really relevant to real world assets. That's just some Barbara adjacent story. I think the story that's probably interesting, maybe or more relevant to listeners who might be thinking of starting their own real world asset project, I think, is when we started Jia, and first started talking to investors. I think there's probably still, it was like the end of the bull market. We're already beginning the bear cycle, but I think there was probably still some investors who couldn't really get their heads around a project that used the blockchain and had such a real world application. To be honest, I think most people were um, more used to seeing, I think, projects that were mostly, I don't want to say this in a sort of a derisive way, but projects that were taking advantage of the crypto casino, like really exciting DeFi projects, which of course take like incredible like math geniuses to pull off, but a lot of them were just like, how can we, pump some yield to a token or just like accumulate more wealth in some creative way. Um, and I think it was actually really, well, at times those conversations were frustrating, but then I was also really inspired when I met a lot of investors who I think basically were like, you know what, we're tired of those projects. We've already been burned by a bunch of them since, it was the beginning of the bull market, and I think a lot of those projects have sort of started winding down. Um, and our lead investor is a fund called TCG Crypto, and our partner from there who led the deal, her name is Gabby Goldberg. She's been a really, I think, influential voice in thinking through uh, mass consumer applications of crypto. Basically, like, how do we onboard the next billion users? How do we get this from being like sort of this sort of niche industry to something that everyone uses and can take advantage of the benefits of? And I don't think I don't think Gabby herself had ever done anything like an emerging markets deal or even like a real world asset deal. But the fact that um, I think she was really helpful, and even just inspiring our own confidence in ourselves to realize, hey, this actually has the transformative potential to be something really big. Um, and and I think we were also really fortunate to meet a lot of fintech, maybe not even crypto native investors who were basically, this is the narrative of real world assets is what got them excited finally about the blockchain. Maybe they'd also only thought that crypto was sort of a, I don't know, just sort of like an online casino and not necessarily something that they were interested in investing in. But then when they saw this project, they could get their head around fintech lending, and all it took was just, oh, you guys also use some blockchain technology in the back end. That makes sense as a project that's investable for us. So I think we ended up being able to attract investors at that intersection of fintech and crypto, and I think that's probably what a lot of RWA projects are doing right now.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's funny that you mention, how a lot of investors may have not been able to wrap their head around or understand really the true use case scenarios. And I mean, it makes sense, with everything up and coming, it can be exciting, but then you have to weed out the, I guess you could say, the frauds in the industry. And that was pretty apparent, I believe, with that, like you said, whenever the bear cycle started last year in 2022, late 2022. And yeah, it kind
Yeah,
of is disappointing to see projects that may have promised, X, Y, and Z, but they, were really just in it to make a quick buck and then get out. And obviously that burns a lot of people, like you said. And yeah, a lot of those projects had a lot of hype, but they were also not sustainable. And I think long run, the ones that are sustainable and really care about building a community or actually caring about, your client as more than just a dollar sign, those are the projects that are going to really be there 10, 30, 40, 100 years later down the road. And so yeah, I think karma is a big deal as well. And I think as long as you're doing things correctly and you're not cheating people just to make a quick flip, those are the ones that are going to stay and really be the pioneers of this industry. So yeah, I love
definitely.
that. Yep. And then yeah, whenever you mentioned sushi and Nairobi, like those two I would have never put together, but I love sushi. It
Yeah.
is it is literally my favorite top. If I had to pick, hey Nikki, what's your favorite food? Sushi's number one. Not even Japanese food. It's like sushi. Um
Well, you got to go to this. All right, it's in the
I guess
Kempinski Hotel. I can't believe they're able to pull this off. I imagine it's a
in
pretty high carbon
Nairobi.
footprint, but I think they fly
Damn.
in like some incredible seafood. I don't know like how often, but it's pretty impressive to get it there. I mean, Nairobi's
Yeah,
not on the coast, so
exactly.
but it's really delicious.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind the next time I'm in I'm in Nairobi. But
Yeah.
moving on here, Zach. And so we've been talking about RWAs and real world asset markets. So do you think that this market is converging or being more diverse in the future? And what are the key factors that support your thoughts on this?
Oh, interesting. I mean, overall, I think the market is expanding and getting more diverse because it's just getting more mature and more healthy. Um, I don't think I have like a revolutionary take on this, but and maybe this is like not inspiring for like true crypto believers, but I see a lot of what we're doing in the world of real world assets is basically just getting the DeFi and blockchain based economy to sort of catch up with a lot of what TradFi had already built. And that's not to say like we're literally rebuilding the picks and shovels of TradFi. The whole point is the infrastructure is better, but I think only now we're getting to like actually introduce a lot of the products that TradFi has always offered. I mean, the initial like real world assets have just been things like tokenized stakes and money market funds or treasury bills or stock market indices, like that sort of thing. And so I think that those kind of were the first real world assets, or maybe there was like some gold trading product or something with real estate. But I mean, even just that, there's think of like the real estate market, the off chain real estate market. There are so many different real estate products, and right now, if you look at like what real estate transactions you can do on chain, they're relatively limited. So I think just being able to do more of that to issue mortgages on chain, um, let people buy into like fractionalized stakes and real estate developments, like that sort of thing is, I think. I mean, it's maybe it's not like some brand new sexy thing, but it's like that is an exciting application. That is us moving finance to a more efficient state. I think in general, the way I think about what crypto can do is it basically just like makes capitalism more efficient. I mean, you can think what you will about capitalism, like as it's a good thing or a bad thing. I think generally it's good, and it's had like some negative um, like costs over the years, but it generally corrects itself, right? Like we don't want to be in a world of like the industrial revolution where we have like child labor and everything. That's like a pure free market, but capitalism sort of corrected that. And so if we think capitalism is generally good for the world because it allocates capital to people who need it and deserve it because they're going to make a return on it, I think what crypto can do and the blockchain in general can do is just make that more efficient. And so the other kinds of real world asset that are gonna emerge and I think be more diverse are just sort of like all of the asset classes you can imagine in the off-chain world just moving on chain.
Right. And that's pretty much the point, is trying to get the traditional finance side of things to get on board essentially with DeFi. But as you know, the SEC is not really,
Yeah.
the most friendly, and they're still trying to fight it. But I mean, with big players like BlackRock and, them trying to pass this Bitcoin ETF, like it's kind of too hard to ignore now, especially once the government is like, oh, okay, as long as we can get our cut, as long as Uncle Sam can get a
Mm.
piece of that pie, sure, do whatever you want. But, it really always comes down to money, unfortunately. And that's just the world we live in. But exactly what I love most about Web3 and blockchain tech is that you're right. You can't fudge the results. You can't mess up the numbers. It is a digital ledger that anyone around the world with an internet connection most likely can view. So it's kind of like you can't hide behind it. And I think maybe that's why the governments and those people up there, they're kind of like, ooh, how do we still skirt around the fact that we technically kind of can't lie or hide, but they know that there's money to be made and they know it's inevitable, I think. So
Mm.
I think they're just trying to figure out a way, how can we work with this
Mm.
technology, but how can we also still get a piece of that pie, essentially. But yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I don't know if I should. I don't have many more educated or sophisticated thoughts or takes on what the SEC is going to do or why they're playing the cards they've played. But
Right.
certainly, like it would be more refreshing to see more regulators take sort of a pro innovation stance. And we've been, you know what? I'll just to take the attention off of like the U.S. SEC. It has been pretty encouraging working in emerging markets with regulators who are really eager to bring innovation in, because I think they see it as a way to deepen capital markets. I mean, the Kenyan Capital Markets Authority is sort of part of this interagency governmental working group on blockchain. I think what I've heard from the individual regulators at the CMA and throughout the Kenyan government are, I mean, yes, people are generally, they want to make sure that Kenyan people and their money are protected, because I think there are so many crypto related scams, but that's not unique to crypto. They're just like scams in general that people need to be protected from. But then when it comes to the blockchain's potential to do something like bring in more foreign direct investment into Kenya, I think people are really excited about how it can do that. And we're a really great example. I mean, the fact that we've been able to finance a lot of Kenyan entrepreneurs that we wouldn't be able to without using the blockchain is proof of that.
Exactly. And I think that kind of rolls into my next question. And obviously, it has to do with lending. So, how do you or Jia, how do you guys underwrite these small businesses in emerging markets? What's that process like?
So mostly the way we acquire and underwrite small businesses is through partners who have sort of these trusted networks of small businesses with a need for financing. Usually, those partners they could be wholesalers or distributors or even payment gateways. So, for example, in Kenya, we've partnered with a payment gateway called Sasa Pay. And so, a lot of small businesses, it could be like a spice vendor, like this guy, Francis, who sells spices in a market in Githurai, Kenya. When he sells his spices, people pay him with Sasa Pay. And so there's all of these payments on that platform that that Francis is sort of just like accruing a digital record of. No one's using those payments right now to underwrite, and so that's mostly what we do is we use that history about Francis to underwrite him and allow him to take working capital loans based on that. Other examples of partnerships could be we working with, say, wholesale distributors. Like in the Philippines, we work with a company called Sari Suki, and what Sari Suki does is they sell groceries. They supply groceries to local Sari Sari stores, and the Sari Sari store is just like a local grocery shop that sells a little bit of everything, from like small bags of peanuts to small bags of shampoo or rice or whatever. And so again, the way um, what Sarisuki is sort of helping to do is create these digital footprints for folks who previously had none, because maybe they only transacted in cash and only bought from local traders offline. But now you can see, okay, this woman, Annabelle in Quezon City in the Philippines, she's buying 5,000 pesos every week of groceries, and she has expressed a desire to grow bigger, but she can't access finance for it. So maybe we'll come in and say, hey, you're always buying 5,000 pesos a week. Why don't we start by just financing like 2,000 pesos of that? And then as you repay that amount, we'll graduate you to a larger and larger amount. And, we have a lot of Sari Sari store owners who are now, they've taken 10 or 20 of these inventory finance loans just to keep on growing their inventory and grow their business. And so all that's to say, mostly the way we underwrite small businesses is nothing too revolutionary. It's looking at data that other lenders never have looked at, either because they haven't had access to this data, or they've thought it's not predictive, or it's not worth their time because these businesses are just too small.
Goodness, yeah. I think these small businesses definitely need the help for sure. And like we discussed earlier, that big challenge of what they run into is they maybe are not financially literate. They don't know where to go. They might be an introvert. Any whatever reason under the sun. At least it sounds like Gia is there to kind of guide them and give them that chance. I think people just need at least a chance to prove themselves, especially if you can see that they, are paying their loans, or that they are doing things on time, or that they are spending X amount every week or month or whatever it is. So as long as you have that data to kind of feel comfortable to give them that chance, that's really all people need sometimes, and you never know what could come of that. So I love that.
Totally.
And then, yep. And in terms of community and user engagement, playing a vital role in most crypto and NFT projects. How is Jia different from those types of projects with airdrops and, those big Discord groups?
Mm. Yeah, for us, our most of our community focus is really on these small businesses. That's not to say that, you know, the general crypto community and like having a massive Discord and people sort of sniffing for airdrops, and not that that's nothing wrong with that. That's just sort of not as much where we play. It's more thinking how can we support these small businesses. So, for example, these Sari Sari stores in the Philippines, we create these small community-based groups where they can trade information with each other. A lot of it is just like, it could be, where somewhere I can get cheaper supplies, or what's some discount I can get, or what are you planning to do for this holiday? Like, what it's gonna be this, whatever, some parade is coming through our part of town. How are we going to deal with that? I mean, that those sort of like micro interactions are what make up community typically. I mean, that's how people are often interacting offline, and we're just bringing that into a digital form so that they can see Gia not just as like a financing partner, but actually a true partner in their business. Eventually, some of what that partnership is not just providing financing, but providing education so that they can, entrepreneurship education to help grow their business. But I think one thing that we're really exciting about building up more is sort of like a global small business network. So, for example, in the Philippines, I've heard a lot of these Sari Story owners say, "Hey, I want to start selling online," but they have no experience necessarily with building a website or with doing digital marketing. We can sort of create that online community, um, and have it sort of work through a token economy. That's not live yet, so I don't. That's sort of just promoting something that doesn't quite exist yet. But I think that's part of what I envision when I think of community.
Yeah, I love the fact that you mentioned building a global small business network. Like I said, for those people who may not know all the different technologies or options that are actually available to them, and then having someone come in who actually does care about their well being and spreading culture and community and, yeah, the international, I don't know if this is a word, but globality. But you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean. So, like, yeah, all around the world, I think it would be really cool if I could go on whatever app or platform. Like you said, it's kind of like a token economy. It may or not exist yet, but whenever this thing does happen, I think it would be cool if I could just go somewhere and just say, "Oh, you know what? I really would want some pond de sal from Armin's bakery out in Manila,"
Mm-hmm.
or wherever he's based. And it's like, how can I get that? Is there another small business who does import exporting that I could get this within a week? Like, that's
Totally.
really cool to be able to connect different things from around the world that are actually from there, to be able to connect people and get the products that they want when they want, and have it more streamlined, essentially, and know that you're actually getting something from that place. And that's what takes us back to supply chain tracking, right? You're trying to figure out,
Yeah.
am I actually getting this? I'm going to go back to using Pondasol. We're just on that now. So, am I really getting
Yeah.
Pondasol from Armand's Bakery, or is this some fake, Pondasol from a different bakery down the street? It's like, you want to make sure that what you're buying, you're getting. And I think that's the biggest thing about sales is like, can I trust you? Can I count
Yeah.
on that my funds are being spent where I'm actually getting a product or service that I'm aware of, or am I going to get something that I had no idea? So I think that's a huge thing with the whole global small business network. That's a great idea. And I mean, you did
Totally.
mention,
Yeah.
yeah, no, go ahead. Go
Go for
ahead.
it. I was just gonna say and in some ways, the whole idea of this is just making the world a little bit smaller and making things filled with a little bit more ease and efficiency and love. If you think about um, a small business owner starting up in here in Los Angeles, where I'm recording this from, or in Manila, where Armand the Pandesal guy is, like, I have way, way more access to financing here. But I also have less access to Pandesal here. And so if you can just shrink those access gaps and let everyone access what they need and what they deserve in a more efficient way, I think you've done something. So I like what you had to say there.
Yeah, I always say probably in a lot of episodes, if you can be one thing, be efficient, and it just rings true and true. You know, nowadays people are so
Mm,
distracted by all kinds of things. Everyone's attention span has gotten smaller and smaller, so it's like how do you really touch people in a way that they can really feel that trust and they want to either invest in you or they want to do business with you or even just being friends. You know, it's like how can you connect with people in a way that's not purely superficial or, you know, like you said, you want to feel the heart. You want to feel emotion sometimes because business it's not it can't always just be serious, you know. For
mm,
sustainability, I think you need to have the perfect combo of warmth and the serious business side. You have to have a good balance, I gotta say, all things in
mm,
moderation but also in balance. But anyway, I know you did mention that the whole token economy thing is it's not essentially super in stone yet, but regarding
hmm.
Gia's future development for plans and maybe future projects or strategic objectives in the RWA field, could you provide any insight on what you guys are working on and yeah, any exciting things that you feel like you should mention?
Yeah. Well, to date, we've had a lot of success and traction on sort of three main products. We do working capital financing, inventory financing, and invoice financing and factoring in emerging markets, and we've gotten to a place of what I'd call like credit product market fit on these three products. So the two next sort of like I guess like there's like vertical and horizontal expansion is growing to more credit products. So testing out asset backed finance and other just larger forms of small business lending. And then expanding to new geographies. I mean, right now we lend in Kenya and the Philippines, and we're excited to get live elsewhere to expand to other countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. We're also excited that means to offer more opportunities for investors through our on-chain liquidity pools. So we'll be launching another pool with Huma, and I think a really exciting thing, Huma just announced a partnership with Cello, the blockchain, and so we're going to be launching a pool on Cello. We're part of the Cello Credit Collective, and so we'll be deploying some capital through that mechanism. And sort of as as uh, as this Jia economy begins to grow, we'll start to put more formal plans together about launching our Jia token. So excited to share more of those at some point in the future.
Wow, that's so amazing. And yeah, I mean, that was pretty much all the questions that we had, but I always like to open it up at the end just in case, you know, do you feel like there's anything else that you would maybe call like an honorable mention that I didn't ask and something that you think the audience and folks
Hmm.
out there who are getting into the industry that you would want them to know? Is there anything else?
Oh well, I before we started recording, you asked me how I pronounce Jia, and I guess I can tell you the story of how we came to call our company Gia. I always like to ask people, like, why is that company called what it's called? Um, so we have a name that's sort of an homage to our global heritage and multicultural team. So my co-founder is her name is Cheng. She's from China, and so in Chinese, Jia is I probably mispronounced that, but um, it means home or family, and we think of that as like the central financial unit. In Hindi, Jia means heart, and so we think we're building banking and with a heart. And in Swahili, Injia with an N in front of it means road or path, and we think we're building the road or path to financial independence. So it's sort of like a triple meaning behind the name, in addition to just being like a cute three-letter word.
I really honestly love that triple meaning. It's I think a lot of people would never get that, so I'm glad you explained that there. And yeah, that's awesome. So thank you so much, Zach. And just a couple more seconds here at the end. Feel free to plug yourself and plug Gia. Where can we find you? Where can we learn more about what you guys are up to? And just yeah, anything that you feel like you want to include. How can people reach out to you on social media?
Oh yeah, on Twitter, um, Gia is at Gia underscore DeFi, so that's JIA underscore DEFI, and I am at zmarks 215. So that's ZMARKS 215. I assume you guys will put that up. 215 is the Philly area code where I grew up. And I love connecting with folks who are interested in talking about this. DMs are open, so we'd love to hear from you.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Zach, for joining us today. And Vsauce is definitely pleased to have you give your insight and stories. It's always nice to hear from people all over the industry who have experiences, especially around the world, because maybe everyone doesn't have that access to talk to other people or be in the same room as other VCs in this industry. So I do appreciate your insight today, and yeah, thank you so much again for taking time and joining us today on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. Pleasure meeting you, Nikki. And yeah, go Jia, go Vsauce.
With this, we come to the end of the episode. To our audience, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed what we are discussing about the RWA and DeFi world, please don't forget to subscribe to Link to the Chain and share it with others. To catch all the latest from us, you can follow our Instagram and Twitter at Link to the Chain. Looking forward to sharing with you guys the next episode. Stay tuned.